that feeling when you walk into a room and see a perfectly balanced aquarium? Not just a fish tank with some plants thrown in, but a genuine underwater landscape that makes you stop and stare? That miniature forest with its winding paths? That serene mountain range submerged in crystal clear water? Or that vibrant underwater garden bursting with colors you didn't know existed beneath the surface? What if I told you that creating these living masterpieces isn't reserved for some elite group of artists or marine biologists? What if the only thing standing between you and your own breathtaking underwater world is simply knowing where to start? Every single stunning aquascape you've ever admired began with someone just like you. Someone who had no idea what CO2 diffusion meant, who couldn't tell the difference between Iwagumi and Dutch style, who didn't know that something called the nitrogen cycle would become as familiar to them as breathing. They started exactly where you are right now, curious but uncertain, inspired but overwhelmed by all the information scattered across forums, videos, and conflicting advice from different sources. Here's what nobody tells you when you first get interested in aquascaping. It's not actually about having a green thumb or artistic genius. It's about understanding a few fundamental principles that, once you grasp them, unlock your ability to create something that rivals those competition-winning aquascapes you see online. The difference between a mediocre planted tank and a jaw-dropping aquascape often comes down to knowing which light spectrum your plants actually use, or understanding why that expensive substrate isn't just colored gravel with a fancy name. Today, we're going to demystify this entire world. By the end of this documentary, you'll understand not just what to do, but why you're doing it. You'll know why some people's first attempts look like magazine covers, while others struggle with algae and dying plants despite following the same basic steps. Most importantly, you'll have the complete roadmap to create your own thriving aquascape, whether you want a minimalist zen garden or a lush jungle bursting with life. Aquascaping is underwater gardening elevated to an art form, but calling it just gardening would be like calling a symphony just noise. Technically true, but missing the entire point. When you create an aquascape, you're not simply arranging plants in water. You're crafting an entire ecosystem, designing a three-dimensional landscape that exists in a completely different medium than we're used to working in. Think about traditional gardening for a moment. You plant something in soil, water it occasionally, maybe add some fertilizer, and generally let nature take its course with help from rain and sunshine. Now take that concept and submerge it entirely. Suddenly, every single parameter changes. Light doesn't penetrate water the same way it travels through air. Nutrients don't just seep down through soil. They dissolve and flow in 3 dimensions. Even the way plants grow changes when they're underwater, developing different leaf structures and growth patterns than their terrestrial cousins. The practice as we know it today really began gaining momentum in the 1930s in the Netherlands. Dutch hobbyists started treating their aquariums less like fish houses and more like underwater gardens. They developed techniques for arranging plants in terraced formations, creating depth and perspective in rectangular glass boxes. But the real revolution came in the 1990s when Takashi Amano introduced his nature aquarium concept to the world. Amano didn't just arrange plants. He recreated entire landscapes underwater, from mountain ranges to forest clearings, using principles borrowed from Japanese gardening and his deep understanding of natural ecosystems. What makes aquascaping so captivating is this intersection of science and art. You need to understand biology to keep your plants thriving, photosynthesis, nutrient uptake, the relationships between different organisms in your tank. But you also need an eye for composition, an understanding of how colors interact, how to create depth in a confined space, how to guide the viewer's eye through your creation. It's this duality that makes aquascaping so rewarding and, honestly, so addictive. The beauty of modern aquascaping lies in its accessibility. Yes, you can spend thousands on high-end equipment and rare plants, but you can also create something stunning with a modest budget and common species. The principles remain the same whether you're working with a massive 200-gallon showpiece or a tiny 5-gallon desktop nanotank. Scale changes, but the fundamental concepts don't. When you look at an established aquascape, you're seeing the result of carefully orchestrated biological processes. Those lush green plants aren't just sitting there looking pretty. They're actively filtering your water, producing oxygen during the day, consuming nitrates that would otherwise harm your fish. The bacteria colonizing every surface, invisible to your eye, are converting toxic ammonia from fish waste into less harmful compounds. Even the fish, often considered secondary in aquascaping, play their role, providing CO2 through respiration and nutrients through their waste. This is what separates aquascaping from simply keeping an aquarium with some plants. In aquascaping, every element serves both an aesthetic and functional purpose. That piece of driftwood isn't just there because it looks nice. It's providing surface area for beneficial bacteria, releasing tannins that soften the water, creating shadows that give certain plants respite from intense lighting. Those rocks aren't random decorations. They're creating territories for fish, providing attachment points for epiphytic plants, contributing minerals to your water chemistry. Let's talk about the tools that transform a glass box into a thriving ecosystem. The equipment you choose is not just about functionality. It's about creating the right conditions for life to flourish. And here's something that might surprise you. The most expensive option isn't always the best for your specific setup. Starting with the aquarium itself, size matters, but not in the way you might think. Beginners often assume smaller tanks are easier to manage, but the opposite is actually true. In a larger volume of water, parameters change more slowly. If something goes wrong in a 5-gallon tank, you have minutes to hours to react. In a 50-gallon tank, you might have days. That buffer zone can mean the difference between a minor adjustment and a complete crash. But don't let that discourage you from starting with a nano tank if that's what fits your space and budget. Just understand that smaller volumes require more attention and faster responses to issues. The shape of your tank influences everything from equipment placement to aquascaping possibilities. Traditional rectangular tanks offer the most flexibility for creating depth and layers in your scape. Rimless tanks have become the gold standard in aquascaping because they eliminate visual barriers, creating an almost ethereal viewing experience where the aquascape seems to float in space. But even a standard rim tank can house a stunning aquascape. The rim just becomes another element to work with rather than against. Now, filtration, this is where many beginners get overwhelmed by options. Canister filters, hang-on back filters, sponge filters, internal filters, each has its place. But for aquascaping, you want something that provides strong biological filtration without creating excessive current that will uproot plants or disturb your carefully crafted substrate slopes. Canister filters have become the preferred choice for most aquascapers because they offer high flow rates with customizable media options. And they can be hidden away in a cabinet, maintaining the clean aesthetic of your display. The filter media you choose is just as important as the filter itself. Mechanical filtration removes particles from the water, biological media houses beneficial bacteria, and chemical filtration can remove specific compounds. In a planted tank, you might skip chemical filtration entirely since activated carbon, while excellent at removing dissolved organics, also removes some nutrients your plants need. Instead, focus on maximizing biological filtration. Those beneficial bacteria are the workhorses of your nitrogen cycle, which we'll dive deep into shortly. Heating might seem straightforward. Pick a heater rated for your tank size and you're done, right? Not quite. In aquascaping, even heaters can impact your aesthetic and functionality. Inline heaters that install on your filter tubing keep equipment out of the display tank entirely. If you must use an in-tank heater, positioning becomes crucial. You want it where flow will distribute heat evenly, but where it won't be an eyesore or interfere with your hardscape. The CO2 system represents one of the biggest decisions in your aquascaping journey. You can absolutely create beautiful aquascapes without CO2 injection, but it limits your plant selection and growth rates. A pressurized CO2 system opens up possibilities for demanding species and accelerates growth dramatically. The system consists of a CO2 cylinder, a regulator to control gas flow, a diffuser to dissolve the gas into your water, and ideally, a solenoid valve connected to a timer so CO2 only runs when your lights are on and plants are photosynthesizing. But here's what many guides won't tell you. Setting up CO2 is just the beginning. Dialing it in, finding that sweet spot where plants thrive but fish aren't gasping at the surface, that takes patience and observation. Start low, increase gradually, and watch your fish and plants for feedback. A drop checker with bromothymol blue solution gives you a visual indicator of CO2 levels, but nothing replaces careful observation of your inhabitants. Water testing equipment might not be exciting, but it's essential, especially in the beginning. At minimum, you need tests for ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, pH, and if you're using CO2, KH to monitor pH swings. Liquid test kits are more accurate than strips, though strips offer convenience for quick checks. Once your tank is established and you understand its patterns, you'll test less frequently, but in those first crucial weeks, these tests are your early warning system. Don't overlook the small tools that make aquascaping possible. Long tweezers for planting stems in the substrate, curved scissors for trimming in tight spaces, algae scrapers that won't scratch your glass. These aren't luxuries. They're investments in your ability to maintain your aquascape properly. Working with short tools meant for terrestrial use leads to wet arms, disturbed substrates, and frustrated aquascapers. If there's one concept that separates successful aquascapers from those who struggle endlessly with dying plants and fish, it's understanding the nitrogen cycle. This biological process is happening right now in every body of water on Earth, from puddles to oceans, and mastering it in your aquarium is non-negotiable. Here's the situation in its simplest terms. Fish produce waste. That waste, along with any uneaten food and decaying plant matter, breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia is toxic. Even small amounts can burn fish gills, damage their internal organs, and at higher concentrations, kill them outright. In nature, the volume of water is so vast that ammonia rarely accumulates to dangerous levels. In your aquarium, you have maybe a few dozen gallons trying to replicate an entire ecosystem. Without intervention, ammonia would quickly reach lethal levels. This is where bacteria become your heroes. Specific species of bacteria, primarily Nitrosomonas, consume ammonia and convert it to nitrite. But nitrite is also toxic to fish, interfering with their blood's ability to carry oxygen. Fortunately, another group of bacteria, Nitrobacter, takes over, converting nitrite to nitrate. Nitrate is far less toxic and, here's the beautiful part, it's actually a fertilizer for your plants. Your plants absorb nitrate, using it to build proteins and grow, completing the cycle. But these bacteria don't just appear instantly when you fill your tank with water. They need time to establish colonies large enough to handle the bioload of your aquarium. This establishment period is what we call cycling your tank. There are several ways to do this, each with pros and cons. The traditional fission cycle involves adding a few hardy fish to produce ammonia naturally, but this puts those fish through stress as they endure ammonia and nitrite spikes. It's like asking someone to live in a house while it's being built around them. Possible, but not pleasant. The fishless cycle is more humane and controlled. You add ammonia directly to the tank, either using pure ammonia or organic matter like fish food that breaks down into ammonia. You can monitor levels precisely and only add fish once the bacteria are fully established. For planted tanks, there's another dimension to consider. Plants can directly consume ammonia, actually preferring it to nitrate as a nitrogen source. Heavy planting from day one can significantly reduce or even eliminate cycling issues. Some aquascapers use what's called a silent cycle. They heavily plant the tank, add ammonia sources gradually, and let the plants and developing bacteria work together. The plants consume most of the ammonia, keeping levels safe while bacteria slowly establish. The speed of cycling depends on several factors. Temperature plays a huge role. Bacteria reproduce faster in warmer water, with the sweet spot around 77 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. pH matters too. The bacteria prefer slightly alkaline conditions, though they'll adapt to a range. Oxygen is essential. These are aerobic bacteria, meaning they need oxygen to function. This is why good filter flow and surface agitation are crucial during cycling. You can accelerate cycling by introducing established bacteria. Using filter media from an established tank, adding commercial bacterial supplements, or using certain substrates that come preloaded with bacteria can cut cycling time from 4 to 6 weeks down to 1 to 2 weeks or even less. But here's a crucial point. These bacteria need food. If you add a massive dose of bacteria but no ammonia source, they'll starve and die off before fish are added. Testing during cycling tells you exactly where you are in the process. Initially, ammonia rises. Then you'll see nitrite appear as bacteria begin converting ammonia. Eventually, nitrite peaks and begins falling as nitrate rises. Once you can add 2 to 3 ppm of ammonia and have it completely converted to nitrate within 24 hours with no detectable ammonia or nitrite, your tank is cycled. But cycling isn't a one-time event. The bacterial colonies are living things that respond to changes in bioload. Add too many fish at once, and you'll overwhelm the bacteria, causing a mini cycle. Remove a large number of fish, and bacteria will die back to match the reduced food supply. This is why successful aquascaping involves gradual changes. Slowly adding fish, gradually increasing feeding, allowing the bacteria time to adjust. Understanding this cycle also explains many common problems. That cloudiness in new tanks, often a bacterial bloom as populations explode, then stabilize. Fish gasping at the surface despite good aeration. Could be nitrite preventing oxygen absorption, plants melting despite good lighting and CO2. Might be lack of nitrogen if your tank is too clean. The nitrogen cycle also interconnects with other cycles in your aquarium. The carbon cycle, driven by CO2 and plant photosynthesis. The phosphorus cycle, crucial for plant growth but problematic in excess. The oxygen cycle, fluctuating between day when plants produce oxygen and night when everything consumes it. Understanding these interconnections is what elevates your aquascaping from merely keeping things alive to creating a truly thriving ecosystem. The substrate you choose is perhaps the most permanent decision you'll make for your aquascape. Unlike equipment that can be upgraded or plants that can be replanted, changing substrate usually means completely starting over. It's literally the foundation of your aquascape, and like any foundation, getting it right from the beginning saves countless headaches later. Let's start with understanding what substrate actually does, beyond just covering the bottom of your tank. First, and obviously, it anchors your plants. But the physical holding of roots is just the beginning. Substrate provides nutrients, either inherently or by absorbing them from the water column. It houses massive colonies of beneficial bacteria, far more than your filter media. It influences your water chemistry, potentially affecting pH, hardness, and mineral content. And yes, it significantly impacts the aesthetic of your aquascape. In the aquascaping world, substrates broadly fall into two categories: inert and active. Inert substrates like sand and gravel don't significantly alter water chemistry or provide nutrients on their own. Active substrates, often called aquasoils, are engineered to provide nutrients and often buffer water to conditions favorable for plant growth. Plain gravel, the substrate many of us started with, is actually one of the worst choices for a planted tank. Those smooth, often artificially colored stones provide minimal surface area for bacteria, no nutrients for plants, and the large gaps between pieces allow detritus to accumulate, creating dead zones. If you must use gravel, choose natural colors and smaller grain sizes, and plan on heavy root tab supplementation. Sand presents different challenges and opportunities. The tiny grain size prevents detritus from penetrating deep, making maintenance easier in some ways. But that same compaction can create anaerobic zones where dangerous bacteria produce hydrogen sulfide, that rotten egg smell that signals serious problems. Plants with delicate roots may struggle to penetrate dense sand. Yet sand can work brilliantly for specific setups, especially when you're creating beaches or paths in your aquascape, or keeping fish that like to sift substrate. Now, we enter the world of aquasoils, and this is where things get interesting. Products like Ada Aquasoil, Fluval Stratum, or UN's Contrasoil are made from baked clay, volcanic ash, or specially processed soils. They're engineered to be perfect for plant growth, porous for root penetration and bacterial colonization, loaded with nutrients, and often designed to buffer water to slightly acidic conditions that most tropical plants prefer. The magic of aquasoil lies in something called cation exchange capacity, or CEC. Think of CEC like a nutrient bank account. These substrates can absorb nutrients from the water column when levels are high, then release them slowly to plant roots when needed. This buffering action helps prevent both deficiencies and toxic accumulations. It's why you can add liquid fertilizers to the water and know they're not just flowing out with your next water change. The substrate is capturing and storing them for later use. But aquasoils come with their own learning curve. Many release ammonia for the first few weeks, requiring cycling before adding livestock. They're lightweight when dry, but can become muddy if disturbed. Most break down over time. That perfectly granulated substrate might turn to mush in 2 and 3 years, though modern formulations last much longer. And they're expensive, sometimes shockingly so for larger tanks. Here's what many guides won't tell you about aquasoil. Not all tanks need it. If you're growing primarily epiphytic plants like Java fern or Anubias that attach to hardscape, or stem plants that feed primarily from the water column, that expensive aqua soil might be overkill. But if you're attempting a lush carpet of Monte Carlo or trying to grow notoriously picky plants like Eriocolon, aqua soil can make the difference between success and endless frustration. The depth of substrate matters more than many realize. Too shallow and plants can't anchor properly, plus you limit bacterial colonization. Too deep without proper management, and you risk anaerobic zones. For most setups, 2 to 3 inches at the front, sloping to 3 to 4 inches at the back works well. This slope creates visual depth while providing varying root zones for different plants. Some aquascapers use multiple substrates strategically. Aquasoil in planted areas, sand for paths or beaches, maybe fine gravel as transition zones. This requires careful planning and usually barriers to prevent mixing. Rocks, plastic dividers removed after setup, or even carefully placed hardscape can maintain separation. But know that over time, substrates will mix somewhat. It's inevitable with maintenance and fish activity. The preparation and installation of substrate is an art itself. Aquasoils typically shouldn't be rinsed despite your instincts. You'll wash away beneficial bacteria and nutrients. Instead, fill slowly and carefully. Place a plate or plastic bag on the substrate and pour water onto that, letting it overflow gently. This minimizes clouding that can take days to clear otherwise. For those on a budget or enjoying DIY approaches, there are alternatives. Organic potting soil capped with sand or gravel, the Wallstad method, can create incredibly successful planted tanks. The challenge is managing the initial chaos as the soil releases nutrients and finding the right soil without additives harmful to fish. Pool filter sand offers an inexpensive inert option that, with proper fertilization, can grow plants beautifully. Your substrate choice should align with your overall vision and commitment level. High-tech aquascapes with demanding plants benefit enormously from quality aqua soil. Low-tech setups can thrive with simpler substrates and appropriate plant selection. There's no universal best substrate, only the best substrate for your specific goals, budget, and maintenance preferences. Hardscaping is where aquascaping transcends simple plant keeping and becomes true underwater artistry. Those rocks and pieces of wood aren't just decorations, they're the bones of your composition, the elements that create structure, flow, and emotional impact in your aquascape. Master hardscaping and even mediocre plant growth will still result in an impressive aquarium. Neglect it, and the healthiest plants in the world won't save your scape from looking chaotic and unnatural. The selection of hardscape materials is your first crucial decision. Not all rocks and wood are suitable for aquarium use, and even among suitable materials, not all work together aesthetically. Let's start with rocks, the foundation of many iconic aquascapes. In nature, you rarely see multiple rock types in the same small area. That's why successful aquascapes typically use just one type of rock throughout. Sayre stone, with its blue-gray color and white veining, creates dramatic mountainscapes but raises pH and hardness. Dragonstone, also called Oko stone, offers incredible texture with its Swiss cheese appearance and doesn't affect water chemistry. Lava rock is porous and lightweight, perfect for beneficial bacteria, but can appear too rough for some styles. Each rock type brings its own character and technical considerations. The size of your rocks matters more than beginners usually realize. This isn't about having the biggest rocks. It's about proportion and impact. A common mistake is using rocks that are too small for the tank size. They get lost visually and fail to create the sense of scale that makes aquascapes captivating. Your main stone, what Iwagumi practitioners call the oyaishi, should be substantial enough to dominate the composition without overwhelming it. Supporting stones of varying sizes create natural transitions and hide the artificial boundaries of your tank. Wood brings organic flow and vertical elements that rocks alone can't achieve. Driftwood types vary wildly in appearance and behavior. Malaysian driftwood sinks readily and has smooth, flowing lines perfect for recreating riverine environments. Manzanita offers incredible branching structure, but needs extensive soaking to sink and can release tannins for months. Spiderwood, with its multiple thin branches, creates intricate shadows and attachment points for mosses and epiphytes. Each type serves different aesthetic and functional purposes. But here's what many guides gloss over. Wood preparation is crucial and time-consuming. Most wood will float initially, requiring weeks of soaking or creative anchoring. Wood releases tannins, organic compounds that tint your water tea-colored. While some aquascapers embrace this black water look, others find it frustrating. Boiling, soaking with water changes, or using chemical filtration like Purigen can manage tannins. But it's a process that can take weeks or months. The arrangement of hardscape follows principles that artists have used for centuries. The rule of thirds suggests placing focal points at the intersections of imaginary lines, dividing your tank into 9 sections. But this is just a starting point. The golden ratio, approximately 1.1.618, appears throughout nature and creates inherently pleasing proportions. In practical terms, this might mean placing your main stone about 60% of the way across your tank, rather than dead center. Creating depth in a rectangular box challenges every aquascaper. Larger elements in front with progressively smaller ones behind creates forced perspective. Overlapping elements so one partially hides another implies distance. Using lighter colored or less detailed elements in the background mimics atmospheric perspective, where distant objects appear hazier. These techniques transform a 2-foot deep tank into what appears to be vast underwater vistas. The concept of negative space, areas deliberately left empty, is as important as what you fill. Beginning aquascapers often try to fill every corner, but empty space provides visual rest and emphasizes your focal points. In Iwagumi style, vast areas of carpet plants serve as negative space, making the stone arrangement even more powerful. Dutch styles use different principles, but still maintain careful balance between planted and open areas. Triangular compositions naturally please the eye. Whether it's 3 main stones of different sizes or the overall shape of your hardscape forming a triangle, this geometry creates stability and movement simultaneously. The peak of your triangle does not need to be centered. Offset triangular compositions often feel more dynamic and natural. Here's a practical secret many aquascapers learn through experience. Your hardscape should look good dry. Before adding water or plants, your rock and wood arrangement should already be compelling. If it doesn't work without plants, plants won't save it. Spend time, hours, days if needed, arranging and rearranging. Take photos from your primary viewing angle. Leave it overnight and see if you still like it in the morning. The interaction between hardscape and substrate creates crucial details. Rocks shouldn't just sit on top of substrate like they were dropped there. Bury them partially, creating the impression they extend deep underground. Build up substrate around bases to create natural-looking accumulation. Small stones scattered around larger ones, what Iwagumi practitioners call suteishi or sacrificial stones, create incredibly natural transitions. Hardscape also serves functional purposes beyond aesthetics. Rocks and wood provide attachment points for epiphytic plants. They create territories and hiding spots for fish. Wood releases humic acids that can benefit certain fish and plants. Rocks can buffer water chemistry. Understanding these functional aspects helps you choose materials that work with, not against, your overall goals. Every aquascape draws inspiration from somewhere, whether consciously or not. Over decades, distinct styles have emerged, each with its own philosophy, techniques, and aesthetic goals. Understanding these styles doesn't mean you must rigidly follow one. Most modern aquascapes blend elements from multiple styles. But knowing the principles behind each style gives you a vocabulary of techniques to draw from. The Dutch style is aquascaping's oldest formal approach, originating in the Netherlands before World War II and flourishing in the decades after. Dutch aquascapes are underwater gardens in the truest sense. No hardscape, just plants arranged with meticulous precision. If you've ever seen those impossibly manicured European gardens with perfect hedges and geometric flower beds, you understand the Dutch aesthetic. In Dutch style, plants are grouped by species in distinct sections, creating what practitioners call streets, pathways that lead the eye through the composition. Height is terraced from front to back, with careful attention to leaf shape, texture, and color contrasts. A Dutch aquascape might have 15 or 20 different plant species, each in its designated area, maintained with obsessive trimming to preserve clean lines between groups. The technical demands of Dutch style are intense. With no hardscape to create structure, plants must be in perfect health to maintain the design. This means optimal CO2, precise fertilization and constant trimming. Some plants need weekly attention to maintain their designated shapes and boundaries. It's gardening at its most intensive, but the results can be breathtaking, living kaleidoscopes of color and texture that seem to defy nature while celebrating it. Then came Takashi Amano and the Nature Aquarium Revolution. Where Dutch style imposed human order on plants, nature style seeks to recreate nature's own compositions underwater. Amano's philosophy was profound, yet simple. Go to nature, observe how plants and hardscape interact, then recreate that essence in your aquarium. Nature style employs hardscape as the foundation, with plants complementing rather than dominating. A nature aquascape might recreate a mountain valley with towering stones and low-growing plants simulating alpine meadows. Or it might capture a jungle riverbank with twisted wood and a tangle of stems and leaves. The goal isn't photographic realism, but emotional authenticity. Viewers should feel they're glimpsing a real place, even if that place exists only in imagination. The plant selection in nature style tends towards species that look wild rather than manicured. Stems might be allowed to grow slightly chaotic. Mosses creep over hardscape naturally. Different plants intermingle at borders rather than maintaining strict separation. Yet, this apparent randomness requires careful planning and maintenance to prevent true chaos. It's controlled wilderness, nature idealized rather than nature raw. Iwagumi style represents minimalism taken to its logical extreme. Developed by Amano, but now its own distinct approach. Iwagumi uses only rocks as hardscape, and typically just one or two plant species. The name literally means rock formation in Japanese, and that's the entire focus, creating powerful compositions using stones alone. The rules of Iwagumi are deceptively simple. Use an odd number of stones to avoid symmetry. The main stone should be the largest and most characterful, positioned according to golden ratio principles. Supporting stones diminish in size and importance, each playing a specific role in the overall composition. Plants, usually carpeting species, serve as negative space that emphasizes the stone arrangement. But Iwagumi is perhaps the most challenging style to execute well. With so few elements, every detail matters. The angle of each stone, the space between them, the flow of the carpet around their bases. Nothing can be hidden. Algae issues are common because the low plant mass and high light typical of Iwagumi create perfect conditions for algae growth. Many aquascapers consider a successful Iwagumi the ultimate test of technical skill. The jungle style embraces what other styles resist: chaos, or at least controlled chaos. Jungle aquascapes let plants grow wild, intermingle freely, and create dense tangles of growth. The goal is to recreate the overwhelming abundance of tropical rainforests, where every surface sprouts life and plants compete for space and light. This doesn't mean jungle style lacks composition. The wildness is carefully orchestrated, with attention to height, density, and color distribution. Background stems might be allowed to grow tall and bunched together, but foreground areas are kept clearer to maintain depth. Fast-growing stems mix with slower species, creating constant change as the faster plants overtake, then get trimmed back, allowing others to emerge. Biotope style takes a different approach entirely, seeking to recreate specific natural habitats with scientific accuracy. A biotope aquascaper researches a particular river or lake, then uses only plants, fish, and hardscape from that location. The goal is education and conservation awareness as much as aesthetics. A Rio Negro biotope would feature soft, acidic black water, specific Amazonian plants, and fish species that actually coexist in that river system. Modern aquascaping increasingly blends these traditional styles. You might see Iwagumi principles applied to a nature-style mountainscape. Dutch techniques of plant grouping might appear in an otherwise wild jungle style. Some aquascapers deliberately break style rules to create something entirely new. The diorama style, for instance, creates miniature above-water landscapes underwater, complete with paths, trees made from moss-covered wood, and hills crafted from substrate and stones. What matters isn't adherence to style rules, but understanding why those rules exist. Dutch style's rigid plant separation maintains clarity in dense plantings. Iwagumi's odd-numbered stone rules prevent static symmetry. Nature style's emphasis on hardscape provides structure that survives plant changes. Learn the principles, then apply them as tools rather than constraints. Plants are what transform an aquarium from a fish habitat into an aquascape. But successful plant selection goes far beyond picking what looks nice at the store. Each species has specific requirements for light, nutrients, CO2, and placement. Understanding these needs, then matching them to your setup and maintenance commitment, determines whether your plants thrive or merely survive. Let's start with understanding how aquatic plants differ from their terrestrial cousins. Many aquarium plants are actually amphibious, growing both submerged and emergent in nature. When grown underwater, they often develop completely different leaf structures. Hygrophila deformis, for instance, has simple leaves above water but intricate, deeply divided leaves below. This adaptation maximizes surface area for gas exchange and light absorption in the dense medium of water. Plants in aquascaping are typically categorized by their placement and growth habits. Foreground plants stay low, creating carpets or small bushes at the front of your scape. Midground plants provide transition and bulk. Background plants grow tall, hiding equipment and creating vertical elements. But these categories are not rigid. Creative placement can use traditionally background plants in midground roles or create unusual effects by breaking conventional positioning. Carpeting plants are often the holy grail for beginning aquascapers. That lush green lawn effect seems so simple but requires specific conditions. Dwarf baby tears, Hemianthus calitricoides cuba, creates the finest texture but demands high light, CO2, and stable conditions. Monte Carlo Micranthemum tweedii offers similar appearance with slightly easier care. Dwarf hairgrass Eleocharis parvula grows like terrestrial grass but needs patient trimming to achieve density. Each carpeting plant has its own spreading pattern. Some send out runners, others grow in clumps that slowly merge. The secret to successful carpeting isn't just meeting the plant's basic needs, it's understanding how they grow. Most carpeting plants naturally grow upward toward light. To create that horizontal spread, you need enough light intensity that the plant doesn't stretch vertically seeking more. This is why low-light carpet attempts often result in tall, sparse growth rather than dense mats. Regular trimming, sometimes weekly in the establishment phase, trains the plants to grow horizontally and triggers lateral shooting. Stem plants form the backbone of many aquascapes, especially Dutch and nature styles. These plants grow from cuttings, making them economical and fast to establish. Rotala species offer incredible variety. From the needle-like leaves of Rotala wallichi to the broad pink leaves of Rotala macrandra. Ludwigia species provide reds and oranges that contrast beautifully with greens. Each stem plant has its own growth rate and pattern. Some stay compact and bushy, others stretch toward the surface rapidly. Managing stem plants requires understanding their growth patterns. Most grow continuously from the tip, while lower portions may deteriorate over time. The technique of replanting tops, cutting healthy top portions, and replanting them while removing older bottom sections keeps stem groups looking fresh. Some aquascapers create incredible effects by planting stems at angles or training them to grow along hardscape, defying the typical vertical growth. Rosette plants like Cryptocorynes and Echinodoris species grow from a central crown with leaves radiating outward. These tend to be hardy and adaptable, making them perfect for beginners. But don't mistake hardy for boring. A well-placed Cryptocoryne wentai can provide crucial midground structure, while a massive Amazon sword can become a living centerpiece. These plants typically feed heavily from roots, making them perfect candidates for nutrient-rich substrates or root tab supplementation. Epiphytic plants, those that attach to surfaces rather than root and substrate, offer unique design opportunities. Java fern, Anubias, and Bulbitis grow on rocks and wood in nature, and that's exactly how they should be used in aquascaping. Their rhizomes must stay above substrate, or they'll rot. These plants tend to be low-light tolerant and slow-growing, making them perfect for low-tech setups or shaded areas under hardscape. The way moss creeps across wood, or how Anubias leaves emerge from rock crevices, creates incredibly natural effects impossible with rooted plants. Mosses deserve special attention in aquascaping. These primitive plants lack true roots and vascular systems, absorbing nutrients directly through their leaves. Java moss is nearly indestructible but can look messy without careful trimming. Christmas moss has a more organized, tiered growth pattern. Flame moss grows in twisted, upward spirals that really do resemble green flames. Each moss species attaches differently and grows at different rates, affecting how you use them in your design. The art of moss attachment has evolved considerably. The old method of tying with fishing line works, but leaves visible lines for weeks until the moss attaches. Superglue gel cyanoacrylate revolutionized moss attachment. A small dab holds moss instantly, and it's completely safe once cured. Some aquascapers create entire moss walls using mesh or wrap wood completely in moss for ancient forest effects. Floating plants might seem counterintuitive in aquascaping. After all, they block light and can't be precisely positioned. But used strategically, they serve important functions. They absorb excess nutrients, helping prevent algae. They provide shade for fish and shade-loving plants. In nature-style aquascapes recreating still water environments, a few floating plants add authenticity. The key is population control. Most floating plants reproduce rapidly and need regular thinning. Color in planted aquascapes goes far beyond simple green. Red plants like Alternanthera reinecki or Ludwigia palustris add dramatic focal points. But achieving intense reds requires more than just selecting red species. High light intensities trigger anthocyanin production, the pigment responsible for red coloration. Limited nitrogen can intensify reds, though too little stunts growth. Iron supplementation is crucial for red pigmentation. Some aquascapers strategically limit nutrients to enhance colors, walking a fine line between vibrant colors and healthy growth. Understanding growth rates helps prevent constant replanting and redesign. Fast growers like Hygrophila polysperma or Limnophila sessiliflora can completely transform a tank in weeks. Slow growers like Anubias or Bucephalandra might take months to show significant change. Mixing growth rates creates maintenance challenges, fast growers overtaking slow ones, requiring constant intervention. Many successful aquascapes group plants with similar growth rates together, simplifying maintenance. Plant placement follows both aesthetic and practical principles. Taller plants typically go in back, but breaking this rule strategically creates depth and interest. That tall Vallisneria in the midground might frame your hardscape perfectly. Fine-textured plants make tanks appear larger, while large-leaved plants can make nanotanks feel cramped. Colors should be distributed thoughtfully. All your red plants in one corner creates imbalance, but scattered throughout, they unify the composition. The concept of plant streets in Dutch style teaches valuable lessons even for other styles. These imaginary pathways created by plant placement guide the viewer's eye through the aquascape. They don't need to be literal paths. They can be implied through color gradients, height transitions, or textural changes. A successful aquascape controls where viewers look first, second, and third, creating a visual journey rather than chaotic, simultaneous impressions. Light drives everything in a planted aquarium. It powers photosynthesis, influences plant shape and color, affects algae growth, and even impacts fish behavior. Yet lighting remains one of the most misunderstood aspects of aquascaping. The terminology alone, PAR, spectrum, Kelvin, lumens, can overwhelm beginners. But understanding light doesn't require a physics degree, just grasping a few key concepts that directly impact your aquascape's success. Let's start with what light actually is in the context of plant growth. Plants use light energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugars and oxygen through photosynthesis. But they don't use all light equally. Photosynthetically active radiation, PAR, refers to the light wavelengths between 400 and 700 nanometers that plants can actually use. This roughly corresponds to the visible light spectrum, though plants use different colors with varying efficiency. For decades, aquarists obsessed over watts per gallon as a measure of lighting adequacy. This made sense with older technologies where wattage correlated somewhat with light output, but modern LEDs shattered this relationship. A 10-watt LED can output more usable light than a 40-watt fluorescent. Watts tell you about power consumption, not light production. It's like judging a car's speed by how much gas it uses rather than reading the speedometer. PAR measurement gives us that speedometer for light. Measured in micromoles per square meter per second, PAR tells you exactly how much usable light reaches a specific point. Low-light plants thrive at 1530 PAR at substrate level. Medium-light plants want 30 to 60 PAR. High-light plants demand 60 plus PAR. But here's what many don't realize. PAR drops dramatically with distance through water. That 100 PAR at the surface might be 30 PAR at the substrate of a tall tank. The inverse square law governs how light intensity decreases with distance. Double the distance from source to target, and intensity drops to 1/4. In practical terms, this means tank height dramatically affects lighting requirements. A 12-inch tall tank might thrive with modest lighting that would leave a 24-inch tank in darkness at substrate level. This is why pendant lights hung high above the tank often disappoint, and why more aquascapers are returning to fixtures that sit directly on the tank rim. Spectrum refers to the color composition of light, and this is where science meets art in aquascaping. Plants photosynthesize most efficiently using red and blue wavelengths. Chlorophyll A absorbs strongly at 430 tRnm and 660 mm. Chlorophyll B peaks at 450 mm and 640 ns. This is why many grow lights have a purple appearance. They're optimized for these wavelengths. But there's more to the story than just photosynthetic efficiency. Green light, which plants reflect rather than absorb strongly, might seem useless. But recent research shows plants do use green wavelengths, especially in dense plantings where green light penetrates deeper than red or blue. More importantly, for aquascaping, green light makes your plants look green to your eyes. A purely red-blue light might grow plants efficiently, but renders your carefully crafted aquascape in unnatural purples and magentas. The color temperature, measured in Kelvin, describes light's overall appearance. Lower values around 3000 K appear warm and yellow, like candlelight. Higher values around 10,000 K appear cool and blue, like skylight. Most aquascapers prefer 6,000, 8,000 K, which appears crisp and white while rendering colors naturally. But Kelvin alone doesn't tell the whole story. Two 6,500 K lights can have completely different spectrums and growth results. Modern LED fixtures often allow spectrum customization through separate color channels. This lets you fine-tune both growth and appearance. Increasing red might enhance plant coloration, but could also accelerate algae growth if not balanced properly. More blue can increase compact growth, but might wash out the warm tones in your hardscape. The ability to adjust spectrum is powerful, but can become an endless rabbit hole of tweaking. Photo period, how long lights stay on, impacts your aquascape as much as intensity or spectrum. In nature, tropical regions receive roughly 12 hours of daylight year-round, but replicating this in your aquarium often leads to algae problems. Most successful aquascapes run 6 to 8 hours of lighting, sometimes with a break in the middle called a siesta period. This provides enough energy for plant growth while limiting algae opportunities. The relationship between lighting and CO2 is critical, but often misunderstood. High light without adequate CO2 creates an imbalance. Plants have energy, but lack carbon to build tissue. This stress makes them vulnerable to algae, which can thrive in these conditions. Conversely, adding CO2 to a low-light tank might show minimal benefit because light, not carbon, limits growth. Balance is everything. Here's a reality many manufacturers won't advertise. Expensive lights don't automatically mean better growth. A basic fixture providing appropriate PAR and reasonable spectrum can grow plants just as well as one costing 10 times more. The expensive fixtures offer benefits like customization, sunrise to sunset effects, storm simulations, and better color rendering. These features enhance enjoyment and control, but aren't necessary for plant health. Light spread is another crucial but overlooked factor. A powerful light with narrow beam angle might create a bright spot surrounded by shadows. This can work for spotlighting specific areas, but fails for even carpet growth. Conversely, wide distribution might require higher overall output to achieve necessary PAR at any given point. Understanding your light's distribution pattern helps position plants appropriately and might necessitate multiple fixtures for larger tanks. The advancement from fluorescent to LED revolutionized planted tanks. LEDs offer spectrum customization, intensity control, lower heat output, and longer lifespans. But they also introduce new challenges. The point source nature of LEDs creates shimmer, those dancing light patterns that some love and others find distracting. LEDs can also create more distinct shadows, requiring careful positioning to avoid dead zones behind hardscape. Measuring your actual light levels removes guesswork from the equation. PAR meters were once professional tools costing hundreds, but now affordable options exist for hobbyists. Even phone apps using the camera can provide rough PAR estimates. Knowing actual PAR at various points in your tank lets you position plants accurately, highlight species in bright zones, shade-tolerant plants in shadows. Carbon dioxide injection represents one of the biggest decisions in your aquascaping journey. It's the dividing line between what the hobby calls low-tech and high-tech approaches. But this distinction creates a false dichotomy. CO2 isn't about technology level, but about expanding possibilities. Understanding what CO2 actually does, how to implement it safely, and whether you need it at all can save you from expensive mistakes or unnecessary limitations. Carbon forms the backbone of all organic molecules. Plants are roughly 45% carbon by dry weight, and they need massive amounts to build tissue. In nature, aquatic plants get carbon from various sources. Atmospheric CO2 dissolving at the surface, decomposition in substrate releasing CO2, groundwater rich in dissolved carbon dioxide. But in our aquariums, especially densely planted ones, natural CO2 sources can't keep pace with plant demands. Without injection, most aquariums maintain 2 to 3 ppm of dissolved CO2 from atmospheric exchange and fish respiration. With injection, we typically target 20 to 30 ppm, a 10-fold increase. This dramatic difference explains why CO2 injection can transform plant growth from slow and steady to explosive and vibrant. Plants that struggle in low-tech setups suddenly thrive. Species considered impossible without CO2 become manageable. But let's address the elephant in the room. You absolutely can create beautiful aquascapes without CO2 injection. Choosing appropriate plants, providing good nutrition, and maintaining balance creates stunning low-tech tanks. The limitation isn't quality, but scope. Certain plants simply won't grow well without CO2. Fast growth for quick establishment becomes difficult. That Instagram-worthy carpet might remain a dream. CO2 isn't mandatory, but it expands your palette considerably. The standard pressurized CO2 system consists of several components working together. The cylinder holds compressed CO2. Larger cylinders last longer but cost more initially. The regulator reduces tank pressure from around 800 psi to working pressure of 10 to 50 psi. A needle valve fine-tunes flow rate. A bubble counter lets you visualize injection rate. The diffuser dissolves CO2 into water. Each component affects system performance and reliability. Regulator quality matters more than any other component. Cheap regulators can fail catastrophically, dumping CO2 and potentially killing fish. The dreaded end-of-tank dump occurs when cylinder pressure drops and inadequate regulators lose control. Dual-stage regulators maintain consistent output pressure regardless of cylinder pressure, preventing this scenario. Yes, they cost more. Consider it insurance for your livestock and peace of mind. Diffusers create tiny bubbles that dissolve readily into water. Ceramic disc diffusers produce ultra-fine bubbles, but require regular cleaning as they clog. Inline diffusers install on filter output tubing, keeping equipment out of the display. Reactors ensure nearly 100% dissolution, but add complexity. Each method has trade-offs between efficiency, aesthetics, and maintenance requirements. Setting the right CO2 level challenges even experienced aquascapers. Too little and plants don't benefit. Too much and fish gasp at the surface, or worse. The often cited 30 ppm target is a guideline, not gospel. Your specific setup might thrive at 20 ppm or handle 40 ppm. The key is observation and gradual adjustment. Drop checkers provide visual CO2 indication through color-changing solutions. Blue indicates too little, yellow too much, green just right. But drop checkers lag reality by hours. They're confirmation tools, not real-time monitors. Watching fish behavior tells you immediately if CO2 is excessive. Subtle changes like slightly faster breathing progress to gasping if levels climb too high. The relationship between pH, KH, and CO2 offers another monitoring method. CO2 dissolves in water forming carbonic acid, lowering pH. If you know your KH and monitor pH, you can calculate CO2 concentration. Surface agitation presents a constant balancing act in CO2-injected tanks. Good surface movement ensures adequate oxygen for fish, but also drives off CO2, reducing efficiency. The solution isn't eliminating surface movement. That risks low oxygen at night when plants consume rather than produce oxygen. Instead, moderate surface rippling maintains gas exchange without excessive CO2 loss. Timing CO2 injection maximizes efficiency and safety. Plants only use CO2 during photosynthesis, so running CO2 without lights wastes gas and risks building dangerous levels. Most aquascapers start CO2 an hour before lights and stop an hour before lights off. This ensures optimal levels during the photo period while allowing excess to dissipate before the dangerous night period when plants consume oxygen. DIY CO2 systems using yeast or citric acid reactions offer budget entry into CO2 injection, but they're inconsistent, require frequent refreshing, and can't be easily controlled. They work for small tanks or experimentation, but frustrate those seeking stability. The jump to pressurized systems costs more initially, but provides consistency and control that transforms the experience. Liquid carbon products deserve special mention. These glutaraldehyde-based additives provide carbon in a form some plants can use. They also have mild algaecidal properties. But they're not true CO2 replacement. Growth rates remain far below CO2 injection. Some sensitive plants and livestock react poorly. Consider liquid carbon a supplement or algae treatment, not a CO2 alternative. The decision to add CO2 should align with your overall goals and commitment. CO2 systems require monitoring, refilling cylinders, and maintaining equipment. They add complexity and potential failure points, but they also unlock plant species and growth rates impossible otherwise. Many aquascapers start low-tech, learn fundamentals, then add CO2 when ready for new challenges. The difference between aquascapes that look stunning for a month versus those that thrive for years lies not in the initial setup, but in the maintenance routine that follows. This is where aquascaping reveals its true nature. It's not about creating a static display, but nurturing a living, evolving ecosystem. Understanding both routine maintenance and long-term management strategies determines whether your aquascape becomes a source of pride or frustration. Water changes remain the cornerstone of aquarium maintenance, but their role in planted tanks differs from traditional fish-focused setups. You're not just removing waste products, you're resetting nutrient levels. Removing allelopathic compounds plants release to compete with each other and preventing the gradual parameter drift that occurs in closed systems. The old-school approach of minimal water changes to preserve beneficial bacteria doesn't apply when you're dosing fertilizers and pushing growth rates. Most successful high-tech aquascapes receive 30 to 50% water changes weekly. This might seem excessive, but consider what's happening in your tank. You're adding fertilizers, CO2 is creating carbonic acid, plants are releasing compounds, fish are producing waste. Without substantial water changes, these accumulate, creating conditions far from natural. Fresh water resets the system, providing a clean slate for the next week's growth. Plant trimming is where aquascaping becomes truly hands-on. Different plants require different approaches. Stem plants need regular topping to maintain shape and density. Cut just above a node and the plant branches, creating bushier growth. Carpeting plants need horizontal trimming to maintain low growth, literally mowing your underwater lawn. Rosette plants have dead leaves removed from the base. Each trimming session shapes your aquascape's evolution. The tools matter more than beginners realize. Curved scissors allow you to trim at angles straight scissors can't reach. Long tweezers prevent disturbing substrate when replanting. Wave scissors create natural, uneven cuts that look less artificial than straight cuts. Spring scissors reduce hand fatigue during extensive trimming sessions. Quality tools last years and make maintenance enjoyable rather than frustrating. Algae management separates struggling aquascapers from successful ones. First, understand that algae isn't evil. It's a natural part of aquatic ecosystems. The goal isn't elimination, but control. Algae appears when conditions favor it over plants. This might mean too much light, nutrient imbalances, poor CO2, or insufficient plant mass. Address the cause, not just the symptom. Different algae types indicate different issues. Green dust algae on glass often appears in new setups and typically resolves itself. Blackbeard algae suggests fluctuating CO2 or poor flow. Green spot algae indicates low phosphates. Blue-green algae isn't algae at all, but cyanobacteria, often appearing in low nitrate conditions. Each requires different approaches beyond just scraping and hoping. The cleanup crew, algae-eating fish and invertebrates, provides biological algae control. Amano shrimp tirelessly graze surfaces. Otocinclus catfish specialize in soft algae. Siamese algae eaters tackle blackbeard algae. But livestock isn't a magic solution. They help maintain balance but can't fix underlying issues. Also, some become less effective as they age and discover fish food is easier than grazing. Fertilization in planted tanks follows different philosophies. Estimative index dosing adds excess nutrients, relying on water changes to prevent buildup. Lean dosing provides minimal nutrients, forcing plants to stay efficient. PPS Pro targets specific daily amounts. Each method works, but they require different mindsets and maintenance approaches. High-tech tanks with CO2 generally need more nutrients than low-tech setups. Testing water parameters helps diagnose problems before they become visible. But constant testing isn't necessary once you understand your tank's patterns. New setups need frequent monitoring. Established tanks might only need testing when something seems wrong. Learn to read your plants. They're excellent indicators of problems. Yellowing leaves, stunted growth, or unusual algae all tell stories about water conditions. Equipment maintenance prevents failures that can cascade into disasters. Filters need regular cleaning, not to sterility, but enough to maintain flow. CO2 diffusers require periodic cleaning as they clog with biofilm. Heaters should be checked for accuracy. Light fixtures accumulate salt creep and dust, reducing output. A few minutes weekly prevents major interventions later. Long-term substrate management challenges many aquascapers. Even high-quality aqua soils eventually deplete and compact. Root tabs can extend substrate life, but eventually, renovation becomes necessary. Some aquascapers do partial substrate changes, replacing sections gradually. Others tear down and restart every few years. Understanding your substrate's lifespan helps plan for these major maintenance events. The evolution of your aquascape requires strategic planning. Fast-growing plants might dominate initially, requiring eventual replacement with slower species. Hardscape can shift or become buried under growing substrate. What looked balanced at setup might become lopsided as plants mature. Successful long-term aquascapes evolve deliberately rather than randomly. Photography documents your aquascape's journey and helps identify gradual changes you might not notice daily. Weekly photos from the same angle reveal growth patterns, developing problems, and successful areas. They also provide references when things go wrong. What changed between when it looked great and now? Seasonal maintenance acknowledges that even indoor aquascapes experience cycles. Summer heat might require additional cooling or reduced lighting. Winter's dry air increases evaporation. Spring and fall often bring municipal water changes that affect parameters. Adapting maintenance to these cycles prevents seasonal problems many aquascapers encounter. We've traveled quite a journey together through the world of aquascaping, from understanding the nitrogen cycle that keeps everything alive to the artistic principles that make aquascapes captivating. You've learned about equipment that seemed mysterious just hours ago, discovered how light wavelengths affect plant growth, and understood why that expensive substrate might actually be worth the investment. But here's what I really want you to take away from everything we've discussed. Aquascaping is not about perfection. It's about progression. Every stunning aquascape you've admired started with someone making mistakes, dealing with algae blooms, watching plants melt, and wondering if they'd ever create something beautiful. The difference between those who succeed and those who give up is not talent or budget. It's persistence and willingness to learn from each experience. Your first aquascape probably won't look like those competition winners you see online, and that's absolutely fine. What matters is that you start. Choose a style that appeals to you. Select plants that match your technical setup and begin creating. That first scape teaches you lessons no documentary or article can convey. How your specific water parameters affect growth. How much maintenance you're genuinely willing to do. What aesthetic truly speaks to you when you're living with it daily. Remember that aquascaping is as much about the journey as the destination. That moment when you first see purling tiny oxygen bubbles streaming from healthy plants makes every challenge worthwhile. Watching a carpet slowly fill in over months, seeing fish exhibit natural behaviors in the habitat you've created. These experiences connect you to nature in ways our increasingly digital world rarely allows. The technical knowledge we've covered, understanding PAR values, mastering the nitrogen cycle, balancing CO2 levels, these aren't just abstract concepts, but tools that empower your creativity. When you understand why something works, you can adapt, innovate, and solve problems uniquely. You're not following a recipe anymore. You're creating your own. The aquascaping community is one of the most supportive and sharing groups you'll find in any hobby. Local clubs, online forums, social media groups. Aquascapers love helping others succeed. Don't hesitate to share your work, ask questions, and learn from others' experiences. That algae problem frustrating you? Someone else has solved it. That plant combination you're considering? Someone has tried it and can share results. As you develop your skills, you'll find aquascaping becomes more than just a hobby. It's meditation when you're trimming plants. It's biology when you're testing parameters. It's art when you're composing layouts. It's engineering when you're setting up equipment. This multifaceted nature keeps aquascaping engaging for decades. Consider documenting your journey from the beginning. Start a journal, create a social media account dedicated to your tanks, or join an aquascaping forum and create a build thread. These records become invaluable references and show your progress in ways that constantly surprise you. That disaster of a first tank? In a year, you'll look back and appreciate how far you've come. Set realistic goals that push your boundaries gradually. Maybe your first goal is keeping plants alive for 3 months, then achieving a carpet, then trying a high-tech setup with demanding plants. Each achievement builds confidence and skills for the next challenge. There's always something new to learn, another technique to master, another style to explore. The environmental aspect of aquascaping deserves recognition too. In an age where natural habitats face constant pressure, aquascapers maintain tiny preserves of aquatic biodiversity. Many plants in the hobby would be extinct without cultivation by aquarists. You're not just decorating a glass box. You're participating in conservation, education, and appreciation of aquatic ecosystems. For those of you inspired to take this seriously, consider entering competitions eventually. Not for the prizes, but for the learning experience. Competition constraints force creative solutions. Feedback from judges highlights strengths and weaknesses you might not see. The deadline pressure teaches time management and planning. Win or lose, you emerge a better aquascaper. Remember that failure is information, not defeat. That expensive plant that melted? Now you know it needs different conditions. That hardscape arrangement that looked better in your head? Now you understand perspective better. Every setback teaches lessons that contribute to future success. The most successful aquascapers have failed more than beginners have tried. Budget constraints spark creativity. Yes, high-end equipment makes certain things easier, but stunning aquascapes emerge from DIY solutions and budget equipment daily. Focus on fundamentals, appropriate light, good flow, stable parameters, rather than chasing the latest expensive gadget. Your knowledge and observation skills matter more than your equipment list. As we close, I want to leave you with this thought. Somewhere right now, someone is looking at an empty tank just like you might be, feeling overwhelmed by all there is to learn. In a year, they might create something that inspires thousands. That person could be you. The distance between dreaming about aquascaping and creating beautiful aquascapes is just taking that first step. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of aquascaping. If you found value in this guide, please consider subscribing to support future content. Share this with someone who might discover their next passion. And most importantly, go start your aquascape. The underwater world you create awaits, and I can't wait to see what you build. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Every masterpiece started as an empty tank. Your aquascaping journey begins not with perfection, but with that first plant you place in substrate. That first rock you position just right. That first moment when you step back and think, I created this. Welcome to the wonderful world of aquascaping. May your plants pearl, your fish thrive, and your aquascapes bring you joy for years to come.